I booked the sleeper because flying makes my skin feel inside out. Paris to Berlin overnight, 4-bunk couchette to save euros, headphones for the snorers, bread and cheese for the picnic. The clerk at Gare de l'Est smiled like we shared a joke that didn't need words when I said, "The old way," as if traveling in a straight line you can feel is some kind of rebellion. I'm not a talker to strangers, but trains nudge you into small communities. In my compartment, me on the lower right bunk, an American college kid whose backpack had more carabiners than sense, a Czech grandmother with a scarf tied just so, and a man my age with a jaw like a bad decision and a crisp suit that said he thought lying well was a skill. We traded the minimum. He said Zurich because he liked the way it sounds. The grandmother said, "I get off early." The kid said, "Wild to everything." We pulled out at dusk, the platform slipping like postcards. A conductor in a navy jacket clipped our paper tickets with a device that made a little mouth, smiled, and deadbolted the compartment door with a well-practiced click. The corridor outside smelled like lemons and tired perfume. The rails began their conversation and didn't stop. I woke at 2:11 because the train had become too smooth. You don't notice the sway until it leaves you. My headphones were on the pillow like a dead animal. The American kid was a mound of sleeping bag noise. The grandmother's bunk was empty, blanket folded with intent. The suit had his back to us, shoes off, socks good, breathing the way people do when they pretend sleep before an early alarm. The compartment door's deadbolt was still down. Someone knocked. Not loud. 2 polite knuckles, pause, 2 more. It wasn't the conductor knock or the customs knock. It was the knock of a person holding a tray. The kid mumbled, "Room service," and laughed into the pillow. The knock came again, same pattern, and something in the sound made the little muscles in my back contract. This was a couchette, not a private sleeper. There is no room service at 2 in the morning. I slid off the bunk quietly. Carpet felt under my feet, and put my eye to the little frosted pane in the door. The corridor was long and empty, and blue in the night lights. No people, just the thin reflection of the compartment's own light on the glass. "Yes," I said, because apparently I am a man who answers doors, even when there are no feet on the other side. "Bonsoir," said a voice, a woman's voice with the cadence of French learned in kitchens and used in corridors. "Room service." "We didn't order," I said low. The corridor air was colder than the compartment. The door's metal hummed with the motion of the train. "Complimentary," she said cheerfully. "Night tea." I looked at the suit. He had turned his head and was watching the door through his lashes, still pretending the kind of sleep you can wake from with a complaint ready. The kid snorted softly. The upper bunks made the compartment feel like a mouth. I slid the deadbolt, cracked the door, and left the chain on. She stood close to the door, too close for corridor manners. Black hair in a bun, crisp white blouse under a navy vest, a tray in her hands with 2 small white pots, 2 cups, a dish with 3 sugar cubes, like dice. Her name tag said Lucy in sans serif, and was slightly crooked like she'd pinned it on while walking. She smiled like someone who finds people asleep charming, but a little rude. "Only 2, I said, because I am an idiot who believes in rules at the exact wrong moments. "For those who are awake," she said, and her eyes moved past my shoulder and found the suit. She didn't look at me like a man. She looked at me like a door that knows whether it is open or shut. The chain made a long, quiet complaint when she reached forward and put the tray up to the gap. The steam smelled like chamomile and something bitter underneath, like orange peel that had been held to a flame. The teapot lids wore little metal birds. "How much?" I asked, because paying for things is a spell you can use to keep the world inside itself. She tilted her head the way service staff do when they're about to say a number and then didn't. "Complimentary," she repeated, for men who write in their sleep. Her English had slid a half step. Too careful, like she'd heard it a lot, and didn't keep any of it for herself. I took the tray, because the thing you do with a tray being handed to you is take it. The weight was wrong, too light, as if the pots were hollow. I put it on the little flip-down table under the window. The kid rolled over and said "bro" to the wall. The suit sat up fast. The door clicked shut without my hand. The chain jumped and fell. The deadbolt slid by itself. Lucy was inside. It happened the way all wrong things happen in confined space, too quickly to make meaning, and then, with a pause where the meaning drops into you like cold water. She stepped past me without brushing my shoulder. She set a cup on the edge of the suit's bunk, as if there were a low table there, and not my shoes. He reached toward it with a small, practiced smile like he was about to make a woman feel welcome at a dinner party. She placed a sugar cube in the center of the saucer without looking. "For the road," she said, and it sounded like a proverb. The kid's phone lit his face briefly, a blue square under the sleeping bag. He whispered "yo," grinned. Then, as the screen went dark, the grin melted like wax. "Who ordered?" he whispered. "No one," I said. "Don't drink." Lucy turned toward me. Her smile didn't change, but the muscles around it had to work too hard, like she'd put it on over something heavier. "For you," she said, and poured from the pot. The liquid was clear, almost water, with a shimmer that made my eyes ache. The smell rose up like a question I'd answered once and forgotten. "What is it?" I asked. "Night tea," she said. "It helps you sleep through stations you are not ready for." The grandmother's bunk was still neatly made. She'd said, "I get off early." The last stop had been in Strasbourg. The station signs there are bilingual and reasonable. Berlin was a long way yet. I thought of a woman with a scarf stepping down onto a platform where there would be no one to carry her bag, and felt the safe size of the compartment shrink again. "I don't want," I said, more rudely than people raised right are supposed to be with service staff. Lucy set the cup on the table like a person placing a hymn book and stepped back to let the suit pick up his. He did. He drank. He sighed like men do after the first glass of wine in a hotel lounge. Relief like a chore. He smiled differently, from somewhere not in his face. He closed his eyes. He didn't open them. "You drugged him," I said, because naming a thing wrong is better than leaving it unnamed and letting it be bigger. "Sleeping," she said. "Sleeping is a door you can walk past when it is not your turn, monsieur." She inclined her head to the corridor, as if I could see through the door to all the cars and all the sleepers who were sleeping through stations they weren't ready for. "We do not throw anyone off," she added, almost offended. "We only let them stay on." "What's the price?" The kid had pushed himself up on one elbow and was looking at Lucy like a street cat watches a fox, admiration and terror in an equal braid. Lucy's smile tired at the edges. "Absolutely not money," she said softly. "That would be vulgar." She set the second cup in front of me. The steam made rings of condensation on the window where the darkness made a mirror. In the mirror, my face wasn't mine for a second, and then it was. "If you drink, you will miss what you are not ready for," she said. "You will wake when you are. Perhaps in Dresden, perhaps in Prague, perhaps in a place where you speak in your sleep and someone understands you without corrections." "I'm going to Berlin," I said. She nodded. "Many men say that." She reached into the little pocket of her vest and took out a sugar cube. Up close, I saw it wasn't sugar. It was a tiny die. The pips drilled neat and shallow. Only two sides marked. She set it in the center of the saucer. "Throw," she asked. The kid reached for the cup, and I grabbed his wrist. "Don't," I said, and he looked at me properly for the first time, past the backpack and the carabiners and the practiced easy. He bit his lip the way boys do when they're trying not to cry, and failing with dignity. "Okay," he said. Lucy watched the suit's breathing. It was slow and the kind of even that belongs to pills and very old faith. "He asked not to get off," she said gently. "He said he is bad with choices." Her smile made a brief, honest shape. "We provide a service." "For who?" I asked. "For the train?" "For the night," she said, and for a second, the corridor lights flickered in a rhythm that felt like coincidence's cousin. The rails whispered under us, the welds, the joints, the small adjustments you only hear at 3 a.m. when the world is polite enough to be quiet for you. The grandmother's bunk remained empty. The bedclothes smelled like lavender and the inside of linen cupboards. I found the metal vendor card she'd slipped under the mattress when I changed bunks later, the kind from markets with phone numbers in a font you can't get on phones anymore. Her name was Natalie, written in a careful hand that made a circle of the dot over the I. "Why 2 cups?" I asked, stalling. Lucy cocked her head. "There were 2 awake," she said. I stared at the tea. The surface trembled with the motion of the train. Beneath it, something seemed to turn very slowly like a coin at the bottom of a fountain. "Do you drink it?" Her smile held for a heartbeat, and then the corners dropped, as if she had allowed herself one small piece of honesty as a break. "I did," she said, "once." "And you woke up where?" "In a place where my mother would not recognize my voice," she said lightly, and moved the tiny die with one finger so it clicked against the porcelain. "It is not so bad. Men are kind to women who carry trays." The kid said, "Don't," again to me, this time. He had wrapped the sleeping bag around himself, like a shell. "What happens if I pour it out?" I asked. She looked truly appalled. "Waste," she said. "We are not in first class." A tiny smile. "We are between classes." She leaned closer. Her breath did not smell like anything at all. Not tea, not toothpaste, not night. "If you do not want to miss anything," she said, "you should give it to the corridor." "The corridor?" She put 2 fingers together and drew them along the air over the cup, as if showing me the shape of a seam. "Sometimes there is room between cars," she said. "Sometimes the doors do not meet exactly. You can pour, and the train will have it. It will like that." I took the cup. It was warm in the wrong way, warmed not by liquid but by intention. I slid the deadbolt back quietly. Lucy stepped aside as if the door were a person we both didn't want to jostle. The corridor was a soft blue space, carpet with a pattern to hide snow, windows showing nothing but our own faces in different sizes. The between door to the coupling was closed. I put my hand on the bar and felt the pressure differential hum like a low note. I opened, carefully, to the safety lip that keeps idiots out of the machinery. Cold air buffeted my face like a hand telling me I had been very brave and should stop now. I poured the tea into the seam between doors. It didn't splash. It went down like a coin in velvet. The air pressure eased, like the train said thank you. I closed the door and felt the click settle into my ribs. When I turned back, Lucy had collected the tiny die and put it back in her vest pocket without a bulge. The suit snored once, an honest sound. The kid had put the sleeping bag over his head like a man hiding from fireworks. Lucy looked at me like a woman at the end of her shift when a last guest has been kind. "You will wake in Berlin," she said. "And you will not be ready. That is all right. You will pretend until you are. This is also a service." She picked up the tray, although I had poured out both cups. The little birds on the lids opened their beaks as if to complain, and then swallowed their words. "Good night, monsieur," she added, and the honorific felt like a pat. She slid the deadbolt back into place, with my hand nowhere near the metal, and stood for a second as if memorizing our faces the way conductors do. "Do not pull the alarm. If you meet a station that does not have a name, she said, it will only make the train cruel. She left. The corridor remained blue and unoccupied. Somewhere far down it, a door closed with the sound of a page turned. I sat on the lower bunk and listened to the rails whisper. The kid poked his face out and said, "Dude." "I know," I said. Did we do drugs?" "No," I said. "We did hospitality." He laughed into the pillow, then stopped, and then laughed again like he needed to make both versions true. At 0403, the train stopped at a station whose name I did not know, on a platform that smelled of damp concrete and someone's breakfast. A woman in a scarf stood under a clock and stared up at it as if it might decide differently. Our door stayed closed. No customs. No conductor. The suit snored the honest way men do who have never had to carry something fragile a long distance. The kid's phone buzzed quietly with a message from someone named AVA that said, "You up?" in English, which is an international language for the wrong hour. He didn't answer. We woke in Berlin. We were not ready. We pretended. The suit woke cheerful and a little surprised by his cheer, shook my hand too hard, and apologized to the air for something he wasn't going to explain. The kid asked for my email and then forgot to write it down. The grandmother's bunk held the faintest shape of a body that folds blankets carefully. The corridor smelled like lemons. Lucy did not come by for tips. At the hotel, I washed my face and a sugar cube from somewhere stuck to my finger and wouldn't dissolve. When it finally did, the water in the sink made a shape like a die, and then forgot it. I slept for an hour and dreamed that a train went through a station with no name and everyone on the platform waved without knowing which of us to wave to. It has been months. I still take trains. I don't drink tea after midnight. If someone knocks twice on a door and says room service at an hour when people should be more honest, I put my eye to the little square and say, "I'm awake," and count how many of me the glass pretends to show. Sometimes I think I see Lucy's name tag on a coat in a different city, under a different language, and tell myself it's a common name. Sometimes at 2:11 the world gets too smooth and I sit up and put both feet on the floor and listen for a knock. If I ever meet a station without a name, I will not pull the alarm. I will touch the door between cars and pour out whatever the train hands me to hold. I will say thank you in the language of the corridor, and if someone offers me a drink so I can sleep through a choice, I will carry it to the seam and give it to the rails, because there is no room service on a couchette. And there is, and both are true. And what matters is whether you wake where you said you would, and admit you're not ready, and go on anyway. They told me the night shift at the Riverside Hospital would be easy. Empty beds, the staffing agency said. Mostly foot patrol, check the doors, help lost visitors. I took it because it paid an extra $3 an hour, and I liked the way the city felt after midnight, like a stage set waiting for actors. The hospital is one of those modern stacks of glass on old bones. The new wings glitter. The lobby has a sculptural thing that looks like stainless steel seaweed, and the elevator banks whisper when they open like they're sharing a secret. But the original building still lives in the middle of it all, brick and limestone, and a marble staircase with a groove in the middle where a century of shoes wore it down. When it rains, the whole place smells like wet wool and antiseptic. My post from midnight to 6 was simple. Patrol floors, 2 through 12. Log my rounds on the little badge pad by each stairwell door. Keep an eye on the ER for the drunks who come in swinging at the air. There is a 13th floor on the plans, but no button for it on the elevators. There is a basement with a laundry that never sleeps. There is a rumor. The rumor is that the south elevators bank C, The ones with the textured glass that shows you your own outline, but not your face skip the ground floor after 2 a.m. They go from 1 to 2 without pretending to stop. If you are in them at 2:17 exactly, they open on a level that doesn't exist, where the lights hum like patient bees and the wallpaper couldn't decide what decade to live in. If you step out, the doors will shut politely because the doors were raised right, and you will be somewhere that wants you to do something you don't know how to do. I heard the rumor my second week from a respiratory therapist with a tired jaw. I laughed in the way men laugh when they have keys and radios and think neither of those things will ever look back at them with disappointment. All buildings make weird, she said. Hospitals make extra. Just don't ride Bank C at 2:17 if you don't want to know where the linen carts go when they decide they're wolves. What happens if I do ride it? I asked. Because men like to step on thin ice if someone tells them not to. She shrugged. Depends what the hospital wants that night. The first time I noticed the elevator skip was a Tuesday. Quiet in the way that means the night is waiting to spend all its coins at once. I was in Bank C at 1:40 with a woman who'd come in to see her father and was trying very hard to talk about anything else. The doors opened on the lobby. We didn't get out. The doors closed. The display blinked G and didn't play the little soft chime it plays on primary floors. Then the number changed to 2. The doors opened. The hallway was empty. The woman flinched like someone had called her name, and we both stood there a second too long. "Good night," she said, without moving. "Good night," I said, and stayed in the elevator like a coward, because I wasn't about to get off with a stranger into an empty hall the elevator felt embarrassed about. At 2:06, on my log, the stairwell door on 11 stuck. The pad beeped at me with bureaucratic disappointment. I swore politely, jimmied it with the flat of my hand, and it gave. At 2:14, I was back at Bank C because it was nearer than Bank B, and I didn't want to cross the old building with its aquariums you can't see into after hours. The elevator arrived with a whisper. I got in. I pressed 1 for the lobby, because I like to make myself a fresh cup of coffee when the hour turns over. The panel shows you where you are even if you don't need it. 11, 10, 9. Steady, gentle. At 2:17, exactly between 3 and 2, the car hiccuped. Not a full stop. More like a person catching himself on a step he didn't see. The floor indicator held on too, like a child holding a secret too close. The doors opened. It looked like a normal hallway, if you were a person who had forgotten what normal looked like. The walls were that particular hospital beige that wants to be kind and isn't. The floor was linoleum in a pattern that pretended it could be cleaned with a mop and a good attitude. The lights hummed in a pitch you only hear when you're more tired than is graceful. There were doors. Some had plaques with names of departments that don't exist anymore. Sanitarium services, convalescent waiting. One said reading room. Another said chapel, but the font wasn't any decade's font. The air was cooler than the rest of the hospital, and it smelled faintly of starch and heat. There was a noise under the lights, like cloth being folded in another room. I put my hand out to stop the doors, because the doors were going to close, and I didn't know yet whether I wanted to be the kind of man who lets doors close on the interesting things. The doors obeyed. My hand came away from the textured glass with a print that stayed 3 seconds longer than it should have. I stepped out. The elevator, having done the polite thing, waited with its mouth just open. "Hello," I said, because we are all fools in some ways we cannot let go of. My voice sounded like a man who used to go to church and forgot how much of the ritual belonged to the room, and not to him. "Thank you," said a voice from down the hall, a woman's voice and not. It had the kind of trained calm that tells you where to sit in a waiting room even if you have blood on your hands. "For what?" I asked. "For stopping," she said. "We have 3 tonight." "3 what?" I thought. I did not ask it out loud. The reading room door stood slightly ajar. The chapel door did too. The third door, no plaque, was closed, but making that small human sound rooms make when they have someone inside, and the person is trying very hard not to make the room responsible for what happens to them. "Do you need security?" I said, and immediately hated how that sounded, like a man offering a lock to a tide. "We need a carrier," she said. "I am not strong in any way that involves picking up a body. I can lift a box of printer paper. I can persuade 2 teenagers to stop fighting with 3 sentences and a bored expression. I can fill out a form so swollen with carbon copies it looks like a club sandwich. I cannot carry anything heavy and precious at the same time." "What do you want me to carry?" I asked, because the elevator behind me had made up its mind that I was inside this now and had sighed shut. "A name," she said gently. "If you could hold one while we watch the others." Down the hall, the no-plaque door made that sound again, the one rooms make when someone inside is too polite to howl. The chapel door smelled like beeswax and something older iron, pennies, and I pressed my hand to the reading room door and felt the texture of paper under the paint, as if 1,000 sheets were stacked between my palm and the wood. "Which name?" I asked, and the woman stepped around the corner with that nurse's glide that comes from nights on your feet and decided knees. She wore a white dress, unbelievably crisp, and a pin at her collar I have only seen in old black and white photos. Her hair was set in a way no one's hair has been set since people wrote letters by hand because they wanted the words to matter. "They have 3 tonight," she said, not answering me. "The linen is late. We're not supposed to start without it." "I can find someone," I said helplessly. "A supervisor." She looked at me with a kindness that felt like a hand on the back of the neck. "You are the someone," she said. "We only open when there is someone. What happens if I say no?" "We shut," she said, "and the numbers continue, and the linen carts become wolves." I do not know why that last sentence decided it for me, but it did. Maybe because it was so particular and wrong that it felt truer than any reassurance could. Maybe because the hospital had been carrying more than it should for longer than anyone still on payroll, and I could do one thing that wasn't just walking around making sure no one slept in stairwells. "What name?" I asked again, and she smiled once, the kind of smile people give you when you have finally put your hands in the right place on the piano, and reached into her pocket and came up with 3 cards. Heavy cardstock, typed on with a machine that assumed your middle initial mattered. She held them out. I took the top one. "N. Harper." You can tell yourself it's coincidence. You can tell yourself names repeat, and anyway, the desert is a long way from a river city, and motels have nothing to do with hospitals except a roof. But my throat went cold around the card. "This one," I said, because I could not say this one again. "Good," she said, and made a small notation on a clipboard that had been polished with use into something like a prayer. "Chapel," she added, and inclined her head at the door like a person showing you your seat. Inside, the chapel looked like a room that had borrowed furniture from 5 different donors and made a kind of truce with it. A pew too short, a lectern too proud, a row of votive candles in little red glasses, unlit. There was a wash of light at the far end that didn't seem to come from a bulb. It had the color of dawn on days the weather doesn't bother to be impressive. The woman nurse, clerk, whatever she had been when this floor was a place, stood by the pew and placed both hands on the back of it the way people do when they are about to say something that matters. "You will say the name until I tell you to stop," she said. "You will not turn when someone opens the door. You will not blow on the candles. You will not correct the way the syllables sound, even if your mouth wants to." She paused. "If you smell oranges, you will stand very still." "Oranges?" She looked apologetic. "The ether," she said, and then, with a tiny smile that acknowledged the century, or something like it. I stood. I held the card with both hands because it felt wrong to hold it like a coffee receipt. She lit one candle with a match that made my eyes sting, and I said, into the room that tried not to be a room, "N. Harper." The sound of cloth folding filled the hallway. The lights hummed louder, as if bees had been made to carry the bright. Somewhere, water ran. The knot plaque door opened and made a little polite click like a mouth in sleep. Footsteps that were not shoes crossed the distance between the man who came in and the me who said the name, and the candle flame stretched toward him like the most patient dog. "N. Harper," I said again, and the nurse stood by the pew and counted with her lips, but not with sound. I could feel people in the doorway, by the way the bright shifted, the way the air changes when a room absorbs another body. I did not turn. I wanted to. My neck invented itches. My knees invented new ways to fail. "N. Harper," I said, and the sound of cloth stopped. The smell of something like oranges, but not pleasant, slid into the air and sat there. The nurse's eyes cut to mine without moving her face, and then cut away, and I held as still as a man with a bad plan can. The card in my hands got a little warmer, or I told myself it did, because there was somewhere else I could have been, of course, and I chose here, and so my body needed to believe here had rules. "N. Harper," I said again, and the candle fluttered, and the flame grew a spine and didn't go out. "Stop," the nurse said, and I stopped as if someone had taken my hands off the piano. She took the card gently back and held it to the candle flame, not to burn, but to read by. Then she nodded once. "Two more," she said, without looking at me, and I stood in a borrowed room outside of time with the taste of oranges and starch in my mouth and let the hospital do what it had to do to make its hour pass. When it was done, the light thinned. The hallway smelled like ordinary electricity again. The nurse walked me to Bank C and put her hand on the textured glass where my print had been and left nothing. "You should get coffee," she said. "Don't ride with anyone down." "What happens if I do?" She tilted her head. "You'll find out," she said kindly, "the way a doctor tells you, gently, that your body did what bodies do, and now you have to live with it." The elevator opened on 2. I stepped in. The doors closed with their well-bred whisper. The panel blinked 1. The elevator did not hiccup. It let me out in the lobby, where the night desk nurse was drawing a snowman on a whiteboard for the pediatric ward, and the security cam monitors showed what they always show, mostly nothing, and a man sleeping in a chair with his mouth open like a child. I poured coffee. My hands shook very slightly, and then stopped, because the body is well behaved when the mind has decided to pretend it is. At 2:39, a linen cart rolled by under its own power. I am not lying. It rolled 5 feet, sighed like a person sitting down, and didn't do it again when I stared at it. The respiratory therapist glanced over her chart at me and raised both eyebrows. "Wolves?" I asked. "They get bored," she said. In the weeks that followed, I did not ride Bank C at 2:17 again. Except, of course I did, because I am a man who wants to see the trick twice to make sure it wasn't his own hands. Twice more, the doors opened on the polite, impossible floor. Twice more, the nurse nodded like she had been counting on me to understand. Twice more, I held a name while the hospital did work so old it forgot to write its own job description. The second time, the card said something like S. Abramov, and I pronounced it wrong the first time and felt the room lean politely to correct me, the way language teachers tilt their heads when you put the stress in the wrong place. The third time, I didn't look at the card because the nurse didn't hand it to me. "Yours," she said, and I said my own name into a room that felt like a hand catching me. I didn't like that. I didn't hate it either. You want me to tell you what the floor is. You want a clean answer. A ward that got walled off in 1918. A service corridor the architect forgot. An HVAC echo that catches the smell of oranges and starch from the old building laundry. It is none of those, and all of them. It is a floor where names get carried, so that people can be washed, or named, or told what they need to hear to make the next passage not look like a door slammed in their face. It is a place that only opens when a person with keys, who thinks the keys are the important thing, steps out and says, "Hello?" in a voice that remembers being someone's child. On my last week at the hospital staffing agency, found me a better post with less walking and more boredom. The respiratory therapist found me filling out my log. "So," she said, amused, "did you meet our extra floor?" "I helped the linen carts not be wolves," I said. She snorted. "That's as good a description as any." She flicked ash into a paper cup, like a woman who had invented rules for herself, when she realized the hospital had had enough rules already. "Bring coffee next time," she said. "They like the smell." I haven't ridden Bank C at 217 since I left, because temptation is not courage, and nostalgia is not a credential. But at odd hours in other buildings, office towers, apartment blocks, I will stand at elevators and listen to the way the doors breathe before they open. And once, in my own building at 303, the elevator skipped the lobby and opened on a hallway with carpeting older than my father, where a woman in a crisp dress looked down a line of doors like she was counting wolves. "Not here," I said gently, like a man telling a stray to go on now. She looked at me and smiled with a professional's relief at seeing a man who understands instructions and let the doors close. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I sit at my kitchen table and put my hands flat on the wood like a person about to talk to God. I practice saying names the way I learned to say them on that floor carefully, without correcting the syllables my mouth wants to own. Mine, my father's, a woman I loved and didn't marry, a cousin who died in a bathroom stall a long drive from anywhere he should have been. N. Harper, I don't know if anyone hears me. I don't know if anyone opens a door on a polite hallway that doesn't exist and holds the names like warm cards in tired hands, and lights a candle in a red glass votive, and lets a wolf lie down and become a card again. But I stand very still if I smell oranges. I do not ride with anyone down. And when the elevator hesitates between floors, like it has forgotten how to be a machine, I say quietly, "Thank you," so that if the doors open on anything that needs a man to hold a name, they will know I will try. My cousin Danny used to say, the motel breathed different after midnight. I thought he was being poetic, because it was his whey grease under the nails, corn-fed shoulders, sentences that wanted to be songs. When he OD'd in a bathroom stall down at the truck stop, his mother asked me to come down from Reno and keep the lights on at the Silver Sage for a month while she sold it. It was the loneliest place on the loneliest road. An L of doors and a neon sign that said vacancy, even when the letters V and A were dead and the rest stuttered like a cough. US 50 ran past like a long bad idea. If you've never been out there, the desert does this thing where it's flat until it isn't. And then there's a mountain, and then flat again, like God ironed Nevada drunk. I'm not a soft man, but grief makes you say yes to stupid work. The desk keys lived on a board behind the counter with little plastic tags that stuck to your fingers. The ledger was one of those green books with ruled columns for cash and plate numbers. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and cigarettes that died in the 90s. At 5, the sun went low and made everything look like it was pretending to be a motel. Night shifts are dead, Danny used to text me. You just listen to the ice machine think about it. He left the radio in the office, set to low classic rock, a trickle of guitars behind the hum of the vending machine, and the buzz of a moth too dumb to stay off the beer sign. The first night, I propped the office door and watched the blue go black. A semi went by every half hour, once a convoy of RVs like a silver caterpillar. People say middle of nowhere like they're joking. Out there, the phrase has a face. At 12:07, the lobby bell pinged, even though no one came in. It's a physical bell, not wired chrome dome you tap. I looked. No one. The door had stayed shut. The AC didn't kick. The bell pinged again, impatient. I went out and checked the lot. 6 cars. 2 rooms with light under the curtains. One big guy from Iowa walked a dog who looked at me like he knew how this ends. I went back behind the desk because life is just being professionally reasonable at the wrong times. At 12:13, the bell pinged and a man stood there who hadn't been there a breath before. Not a magic trick. It was like my mind hadn't done the work of noticing him crossing space. He wore a jean jacket with a patch of a beer I don't drink and a hat that had been through more days than his truck. He asked for a room. Voice like road dust. I gave him 14 because I liked how the key looked in my hand. He didn't sign the ledger, just pressed his palm to the counter in a way that left no print. He said thanks without moving his mouth right. He went back outside and walked to 13. Hey, I said friendly. Wrong door. He looked at me like I'd spoken physics. He stood for a long second between 13 and 14 as if the numbers meant something to him, and then slid the key into 13 and turned it like it was the door he'd meant all along. The lock clicked wrong. The door opened. He went inside. I stood there with the helpful smile on my face until it died of embarrassment. I told myself, grief makes you polite to ghosts. At 2, the radio in the office went to static for exactly a minute and then back to someone singing about a woman named after a month. At 2:11, the ice machine sighed like it had been relieved of a heavy burden. At 2:26, a kid ran down the walkway, barefoot, laughing the sharp laugh of someone trying not to cry. He stopped at 13, touched the door with his palm, and then was gone between one breath and the next. This is the part where you say, I should have called someone. The desert doesn't have a number for this. Room 13 wasn't on the board. The tags went 11, 12, 14, 15. The doors went 11, 12, 13, 14. I walked the line until my feet knew the sound of each gap in the concrete. 13's window had the same nicotine yellow curtain the others had. The AC rattled like it was chewing ice. When I knocked, the sound came back to me like I'd hit a drumhead in a gym. You okay in there? I asked, the way you ask when you don't want to know. The AC stopped. A woman laughed once, then swallowed the rest of it. I stepped back. The neon buzzed in the lot like an insect the size of a horse. At 4, I gave up on pretending to do paperwork. I went into the office bathroom where Danny had written "calm down" on the mirror in dry erase. He never had to tell himself that before. I splashed water on my face and told the man in the mirror some things I believed when I said them. When I came out, the ledger was open to a page with a name written on it in a hand that wasn't mine. No address. Just N. Harper, room 13, paid cash. Plate none. Nobody signed their initial in 1978 cursive anymore. I put my hand on the paper like I was steadying a child before a bus. The paper didn't feel like paper. It felt like the stitched skin of a baseball. I closed the book. I turned the radio off and on again out of spite. Dawn gave the desert its edges back like a concession. I told my aunt nothing. She's a woman with a spine like rebar. She would have smiled and said, "It's the heat." The second night, 3 motorcyclists came in at 10. 3 helmets under 3 arms, like a triptych. I gave them 6, 7, 8 for the rhythm. At midnight the bell pinged when no one touched it, And then Danny came in. I mean that very literally. He stood where the unknown man had stood, one hand in his hoodie pocket, face thinner than it had ever been in life. He looked bad. He looked like the last time I saw him, gray around the eyes, mouth trying to be a smile while the other muscles decided what to do with the lie. "You can't be here," I said, like a man scolding a cat for being impossible. "You're dead." "Yeah," he said. "I am." His voice sounded right and wrong in the same breath. He lifted his hand like he meant to touch the bell, and then set it down, like he'd remembered he didn't get to touch anything. "Mom asked you to keep the place. You're a good boy." I said something that was a name and a curse and a prayer. He nodded at the board. "Watch 13, he said. "It's hungry." I saw someone go in. "Yeah," he said again. "It takes what it's owed. Some nights it feels hungrier. Trash day, new moon, after rain. It's a door, Danny." "It's a mouth," he said, gentle. "Same difference if you're on the wrong side." He started to go, and I said, like a child at a pickup spot, "Stay." He smiled badly. "I did," he said. "Too long." He vanished like a man steps out through the wrong door. The radio went to static. The AC kicked on in the lobby, even though the thermostat said 69. The ice machine groaned like a man getting up from a low chair. At 1, a woman came in carrying nothing. She wore a floral dress that didn't belong to any decade I could name, and shoes that had seen more tile than dirt. She asked for a room for a little while. I gave her 2 because it's closest to the office, and I wanted to hear if she cried. She signed the ledger with the careful hand of someone who learned on lined paper with a teacher who rapped knuckles. N. Harper. Again. "You came in last night," I said, before my common sense could make my mouth do something else. She blinked slow, like a desert animal. "I never leave," she said. "Can you make the fan stop rattling?" "The fan?" "In 13. She smiled, tired. "The rattle makes the mirror shake." "You're in 2. She looked at her empty hands, and then at mine like we were playing cards, and she'd just learned what game this is. "I'll be in 13, she said, and walked out like a woman trying not to wake a child with a bad fever. I went after her, because I'm not as soft as I think, and I watched her put her hand on 13's knob and walk through like it was a hospital door. The AC rattled. The neon buzzed. I stood in the desert and let the sweat make a map down my back. You can live with anything if it has rules. The motel's rules were stupid and mean, but they were rules. 13 takes who it wants, usually the ones who never really left whatever room they died in. It coughs them back sometimes, the way a sea coughs back bottles. The ledger writes what it needs to keep the world consistent. The bell pings when the mouth takes a breath. The ice machine sighs when someone stops trying. I started leaving offerings. I don't believe in anything, but you try not making bargains with a door you have to walk past to get to your car. I left 3 little hotel soaps on the windowsill. I left a stack of paper cups. I left a folded 20 in the crack and apologized for every time I judged anyone for cash. One night, a state trooper came in and asked if we had a room for an hour. She had eyes like a woman who has learned to get facts out of stone. I gave her 5. She looked at the line of doors like a woman counting teeth. Anyone in 13? She asked. Too casual. It's not rentable, I said. Good, she said. Then you're not the kind I have to be mad at. She tapped the ledger, which had decided to be 1984 that day. You ever see the same name twice? It's the desert, I said. People circle. She held my gaze like she was measuring me for a lie. If you see a kid with a red t-shirt run past, don't try to grab him, she said. He's always just out of reach. You'll break your nose on the rail. How do you know? She looked at the doors again. The neon. The way the road made a straight line with no promises. I grew up here, she said. At 333. Something hit the door to 13 from the inside, hard enough to make the frame shudder. I went out and stood with my hand on the knob and felt it jump under my palm like a heart. Easy, I said, to a piece of plywood and to something that had gotten stuck between one life and the next. It hit again, but softer, like it had worn itself down on the first try. The AC stopped rattling. The mirror, whatever mirror was in there now, went still. You want a climax. I get it. People always want the one big night where the rules all come clear. I had that on a Tuesday. A thunderstorm rolled across the flats like a man dragging a chain. The sign went dark. We lost power. In the dark, the desert becomes the ocean your grandparents say you can't imagine. Lightning hit the far slope and turned the whole motel white. The bell pinged once like it had been waiting. When the thunder finished what it had to say, someone knocked on 13 from the outside classic, twice, a third time telling me who it was. "Nate?" a woman's voice asked, tired and mad at once. "You forgot the ice." People have their own ghosts. I don't judge. The doorknob turned. The door opened. The room was dark, like a cave, and lit like a photograph in a stranger's wallet. The woman who said N. Harper stood in the doorway like she'd been playing at this for 50 years. She held a bucket. She had the posture of someone who believes she will be forgiven for everything by the person inside. She stepped in. The door swung shut and latched. The power came back on like the motel had decided to remember how. After those, the rules settled in my bones the way Danny's jokes had always lived there. I worked a month. I gave 13 to people who were already halfway in, and to no one else. I answered the bell even when no one came. I told my aunt the ice machine needed a service. I locked the office and went home to Reno and took a city job where the only doors that bite are elevator doors that hate your timing. Sometimes I dream of the desert breathing, in and out, like a thing learning to sleep. In the dream, I'm behind the desk and the ledger is a mouth, and it wants my name, and I keep handing it other people's until it sighs. I wake at 12:07 and listen for a bell. There's none. The city makes its noises like it's paid to. I go back to sleep. Last month I drove US 50 because grief comes in anniversaries even when you're busy. The Silver Sage is a Dollar General now. The sign is gone. The neon hum has been replaced by an air curtain that makes your hair do a thing. I stood in the candy aisle and felt the shape of the L of doors like a phantom limb. There's a cinder block wall where 13 would have been. It's smooth and blank and white. A kid ran his hand along it the way kids do, bored and physical. He laughed a sharp laugh and then didn't. His mother told him to cut it out. He didn't. I bought gum. I went outside and stood where the walkway would have been and listened. The wall was very quiet in the way new things are when they're waiting for stories. I said my cousin's name out loud, and then I said the name in the ledger because people deserve to hear their names in air now and then. A truck went by and the air shoved at me. The sky looked like weather had been erased from it by someone who preferred rules. On the way back to the car, I tripped on nothing and caught myself on the painted curb. I cursed. A woman in a floral dress passed me carrying nothing and everything. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. We mind our own in the desert. I got in, put the AC on too high because that's how I grieve, and drove until the city put its smell back in my lungs. When the bell pings in my dreams now, it's always one ring. Patient. I tell it I hear it. I tell it I'm not the one behind the desk anymore. I tell it I hope somebody decent is. Some nights, I wake and think I hear a fan rattling and a mirror trembling in a room that doesn't exist. And I lay my hand on the nightstand, like it's a door, and say easy to myself and to whatever mouths rooms happen to be, and I go back under.